Hello, everyone. This is Fadi, and when I welcome you back to a continuation of this new series on more Meccan problems in terms of the search for Mecca. And we wanted to call it And the Search Continued, simply because we are coming across more and more evidence, courtesy of Dr. J. Smith and his team, that disproves the standard Islamic narrative. Let's say, basically that it proves the holes in the narrative facts, and basically we're not finding any evidence that can corroborate the idea that Mecca existed when the standard Islamic narrative said it existed. We're not finding evidence to corroborate some of the traditions about, for instance, what we showed you last time, the burial sites of these prophets, or many other things, as we will continue to unpack these additional evidence. Last time, we basically concluded, and Dr. J basically made a statement as far as where do Muslims get these facts from? In other words, what are the sources that feed into the standard Islamic narrative? And we want to pick it up from here. Dr. J, welcome back.
Okay, thank you.
So, that's the question, and obviously you and I know the answer, but we want our viewers to understand where these sources come from.
Now, before we really get unpack Mecca, we've got to say, well, what are all the Muslims dependent on for everything they know? And what we're finding out is that it's not the best source. What are we talking? Let's just go back, and I want to look at this map. Let's put this map up here to show you what and who is it that, or where is it that the Muslims are going to. What they do is they always start with the idea that Muhammad it was in this part of the world that I'm pointing to right here, this dark green here. See this dark green here? That is the area that existed during the time of Muhammad's lifetime. So nothing really was controlled beyond that dark green area.
I mean, there's just a little bit of Oman, but that's what you mean here is when Muhammad, according to tradition, was living, these areas converted to Islam.
Right. This is part of the empire at that time.
Right.
According to the standard Islamic narrative, that's what they have. Once he died, then Abu Bakr comes and he then controls this part here. So you see this part here. That's all then under his control. And he is from 632 to 634. So he brings the whole peninsula under his jurisdiction. He dies peacefully, and then Umar and Uthman and Ali. So they're the last three of what we know as
the righteous caliphs.
Yeah, the Rashidun period.
Rashidun, exactly.
And that's this area here and this area here. So all of this now part is under their control, this part right in here. So that's according to what Islam tells us, not history, but what Islam tells us. And then after Umar is from 634 to 644, Uthman is from 644 to 656, and then Ali is from 656 to 661. So by 661, we're roughly 40 years after the caliphate was inaugurated in 624, roughly 40 years later, that whole area, this whole swath of land is under their control. The light green, the little bit green, and the olive green, and then the dark green. Now, once they die, then the Umayyads come over and they then enlarge the boundaries over here all the way to what is, Kabul, so that's Afghanistan in the east, all the way over to Spain. Andalusia was called then.
Exactly.
What is Spain today over in the west. So that whole swath of land is what we're talking about. And this is the whole area up until 749. So we're talking about mid-8th century. The Umayyads are in control. 661 to 749. Now, here's the problem. Who tells me all this? Where do we get this from?
Right.
This looks nice on a map, doesn't it?
And that's where I grew up believing in and studying also.
And I would suggest everybody who's watching this show, this is all that you have been told. This is all that you know. This is all that I was ever told. This is what I grew up with. This is the only thing that's taught in our universities. This is the only thing that's taught in all of our seminaries and our Bible schools. You name it, there is only one narrative, and the narrative is this. This is what we're to believe. This is what we're to be told. And all of this that I've just told you comes from what source? Well, let's look at the next slide, because this is the difficulty, and we talked about this earlier in our earlier programs. what the Islamic narrative tells us, that it all happens here in Mecca and Medina. So those are the first two cities. This is where everything happens. This is where Adam and Eve come to. This is where Abraham comes to. This is where Muhammad was born in 570. This is where everything happens. The Quran is revealed here, not where anywhere outside of here. This is where all, not just Abraham. We talked about as many as 300 prophets all existed here. Even the Queen of Sheba, I had no idea. I thought she was way down here, but no, here she is up in here. So all this revolves around this because of what? Because of the Standard Islamic Narrative. Well, all of the writers for the Standard Islamic Narrative, they're down here. Look down here. Can you see? So you have Ibn Hisham. He is the first to write this down. Look at his dates. 833. Look at the bottom of here. 833, well, how many, after 632, how many years are we talking about?
It's almost 200 years, less 2 years at least. I mean,
200 years.
Yeah.
200 years later, the first reference we get to this man named Muhammad living in a place called Mecca and Medina.
And right here, we don't have eyewitness account immediately. This is discounted completely. You cannot tell me that there were eyewitness accounts that corroborated the writings of Ibn Hisham, proved it, shared detailed evidence with him. You can tell me it was orally transmitted. Doesn't matter. It's the big deal. So what? That orally transmitted. Things change over time.
Well, stop and think. If we as Christians were dependent on what Jesus did, we would have to go to the 3rd century. We would have to go to 200 and later to find out who Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did not live in the 1st century. They lived in the 3rd century.
Imagine if that's the case.
How do we defend him?
I mean, Muslim friends are attacking the gospel when it's like 20 years written or 30 years written after the time of Jesus, and they're upset with that.
You have Paul's letters were written within 15 years of Christ's death. You have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all written within 40 years of Christ's death. Right. And here, the Muslims who are attacking us and saying that cannot be trusted, they are not looking in their own mirror. They have nothing for 200 years about Muhammad, at least for his biography. Right. As far as for his sayings, what he said, that doesn't come till Al-Bukhari. Look at Al-Bukhari. That's 870. That's 240 years after the fact. And then you have Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, and all. They come after 870. And as far as the commentaries on unpacking the Quran, as far as the histories of mankind, they're introduced by Al-Tabari. Look at his date. That's 923. That is 300 years later. So 200 to 300 years is everything they're dependent on for everything they know about this man, this place, and that book. The man, the place, and the book all come and are introduced 200 to 300 years later. Thank God we don't have that problem with Christianity.
Amen. Amen.
But it's not just that. It's not just that. Look and see where these people lived. Take a look and see where they lived. I'm putting them up on the map there. Look at them. Boom, boom, boom. Well, we do know that Ibn Hisham was born in Basra, but he did all his work. He was kind of grew up in Cairo, but he did all his work in Baghdad over here. We know that Al-Bukhari is from Bukhara, and that's why he's called Al-Bukhari.
That's right, yeah.
Bukhara is way over here in Uzbekistan. We know that Al-Tabari was born and grew up here in Tabaristan.
That's why it's called Al-Tabari.
Tabari is called Al-Tabaristan, which is to the modern-day Iran. So there you have Uzbekistan, you have Iran, and they all did their work here in Baghdad, which is in Iraq. That is 1,100 miles away from way down here. Everything was done up here in the north.
And north, exactly. North. I like this map because everybody can see the north, basically, dilemma. The northern dilemma for the Standard Islamic Narrative. Everything is pointing north.
Everything is pointing north.
Yes.
What's more, all of these northern areas are where the Abbasids originated, and every one of these writers are from the Abbasid period. None of these are earlier than the Abbasid period, who only come into existence from 749 on. That's over 100 years after Muhammad. So almost everything we know about Muhammad, about where he lived, about what he did, about the book that he received, all of this comes from the Abbasids, who all lived in Baghdad, which was their headquarters. Though they all grew up in these other countries, none of them were down here. This isn't an Abbasid narrative. It has nothing to do with history. So our conclusion? Well, let's bring our conclusion in right here, bouncing it in. They all wrote their material hundreds of miles too far away and hundreds of years too late. Can you see why this is such a problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, this is why we've been hammering this idea, or hammering out this idea, that there is a northern problem when it comes to Standard Islamic Narrative. What we mean is this. For instance, where do qiblas face? They all come from north, sometimes pointing to where? To Petra. At least the first 200 years of Islam, what we mean by that, if we use the Standard Islamic Narrative, meaning Muhammad died in 632, for 200 years from that time forward, at least since the rise of Islam 610, we have multiple issues: the direction of Qibla, how mosques were facing towards, basically when it comes to prayers, origins of the most prominent readings and varied readings of the Quran. Right now, you have historical writings of bibliography, and I should say biography as well, commentaries, history of Al-Tabari, commentaries of Ibn Kathir, and the list can go on and on and on. Everything is pointing north. Why is that significant? Wouldn't you expect that many of the prominent writings and sources will come from the land itself, from Mecca, from Medina? Wouldn't you expect that the prominent variant Quranic readings will come from Mecca or Medina? But that's not the case. And that's why we want to emphasize these findings, because the more we talk about it, the hope is that more and more Muslims will wake up to the reality that you're either living a mythical life, or you can begin to explore factual life. Where do we go from here, brother?
We're going to actually ask the next question, which is there a history? And so let's go right into it, because we do want to finish this off before. When you look at the Quranic references, just put them up there on the screen. The Quranic references, if you look there, are only, there's only one. As I said earlier, it's only one place, chapter 48, verse 24. Mm-hmm. And he it is who hath withheld men's hands from you, and hath withheld your hands from them in the valley of Mecca, after he had made you victors over them. Allah is CIRA. What do you do? What does that tell you? Not to tell you much, other than the fact that Mecca is in a valley. Is Mecca in a valley?
Well, I mean, if it is a valley, it's a flat valley, that's for sure.
It's not what I would call a valley. And of course, that's it. That's all we know about Mecca from the Quran. If this is such an important place, if it is the greatest, the oldest city in history, it's where Abraham was, it's where all the prophets are buried, at least 300 of the prophets are buried, then why is there only one reference to it in the Quran? And really, the reference we have doesn't tell you much at all from what we do know about Mecca. But more than that, Dr. Patricia Corona found this. She said the earliest, and let's go back to the slide here, that the earliest reference we can find for the city called Mecca is the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius Continuatio Byzantia Arabica. This is from 741. She cannot find any reference until this day. Now, she introduced this back in 1987 when she wrote in Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam. So it's been out over 20 years. In fact, we're talking about 30 years it's been out, and still no Muslims have been able to find something better than this. Find a reference that's earlier than the Methodius Continuata Byzantia Arabica from 741. Show me a reference that's earlier. They can't find it, which suggests in 30 years, if they can't find it, they're not going to find it in the next 30. So you've got to go with this as the earliest reference. Muhammad died in 632, according to the Standard Islamic Narrative. If it doesn't get to introduce as a reference point until 741, when is it put on any map? It's not put on a map until 900 AD. We don't see it on any map. We've done this before. We've already got this, so I don't want to repeat ourselves. But she didn't read enough. She didn't go far enough. Because when you read the entire Pseudo-Methodius Continuato Byzantia in 741, you need to read the second part of that reference. She just was looking for the name itself. She didn't unpack it. What does it say afterwards? Well, it says, as they consider it, the home of Abraham, which lies in the desert between Ur of the Chaldeans, that's the magicians, and Mecca, the city of Mesopotamia. Hold on a minute. Why didn't Dr. Crone pick this up? Mel from Sneakers Corner is a good friend of ours. We've used him, and he was the one that picked this up, and he said, hold on a minute. I'd like to know where this home of Abraham is. Now, today, we know the home of Abraham, Ur, is in southern Iraq.
That's right. It's a land of Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, and that corroborate the biblical story.
But not in the 8th century. Not in the 8th century. It was because of J.E. Taylor in 1853 who discovered Ur. That's in the 19th century. Before the 19th century, Ur was always between Edessa and Haran. Everybody knows that if you look at any of the ancient annals, including all the time from the 8th century. We're talking about the 8th century now. In the 8th century, look at this map here, and Ur was always known as between Edessa Edessa and Haran. Here's Edessa and Haran, and that's where Mecca was. That's where Abraham came from. That's what this inscription is talking about in 741. It's referring to that place. Well, where do you think that place is? That's in southern Turkey.
Right.
Southern Turkey.
Right.
That is nowhere near Mecca and Medina. It's nowhere near what Muslims are telling us. So the original Mecca, according to in the 8th century, the Mecca that this document is referring to, is located in southern Turkey, where they believed at that time Abraham came from. But it was because of J.E. Taylor, who was the one that finally found where Ur was, and that was in the 19th century. And then, of course, we know that today, everybody that goes to southern Iraq, you will find that there. But you notice what we've been saying over and over again. In fact, it's getting boring. It is just too far north. And again, directly above, straight above north of what is the present-day Mecca. But note what they are now doing. Let's look at this slide here. Notice what they're doing. Here's that clock tower that I said before. The world's the fourth highest building, the world's largest clock, and also they want to look like Big Ben there in England because they want to make it Meccan being time. All this construction that's going on. Well, take a look at this slide. That's what they're looking for. That's what it's going to be.
That's the master plan, basically.
Yeah,
how it's going to look like.
One of these is going to be the one they're going to choose. So I'm showing you all four because we don't know where they're going to go with yet.
But let me emphasize something. I mean, I am an engineer in the construction field. I spend my career doing projects like this. To build high rises like this, it demands solid, strong foundations. That demands also digging deeper sometimes.
You're going exactly where I'm going with. Take a look at the next slide.
Right.
That's exactly where I'm heading towards. See, this is what it looks like today. In fact, this is as the clock tower is being built. You can still see they're still constructing the top of the clock tower. So even when you were looking at this, take a look at all these cranes down here. All these cranes, here's the Kaaba right there.
Right.
All these cranes around it. Whenever you build large building like what you're talking about, you've got to dig deep so that things don't tip over or don't fall over or don't get deconstructed. Now, when you dig foundations, you start to look for things. And of course, if you're an archaeologist, you want to be there at the table because all this material is coming out of what they're digging. So what are they digging? Well, Dan Gibson was at a conference a number of years ago when he asked this very question. And there were some Saudi Arabians, I understand, they were sitting at the table with him. He said, what have you found with all of these artifacts? You're archaeologists, you have a museum there in Mecca, and in the museum you have all the artifacts that you have found from all these diggings. Can you tell me what the earliest things are? And as you notice, they were kind of sheepish, and the reason they could come up with anything, they said the best that they could come up with was an old Ottoman fort from after 1299. Look at the date. 1299.
And that's when the Ottoman Empire, basically.
When the Ottoman Empire. Yeah. This is an Ottoman fort from after the 13th century that they had found.
Because it started in 1254, basically.
So why couldn't they find? Well, take a look at this slide here. Why is there no history? Just look at these pictures. These are pictures from Mecca in the 1800s, 1900s. And you notice that they are bleak. There's a desert. Why is this important? Well, stay tuned. We're going to get into that because that's the next episode. We're going to show you something that we have just begun to find about and something that we need to start throwing and asking Muslims to come up with. But that's for the next episode.
Absolutely. And as always, thank you so much, everyone, for watching this. In fact, we want to thank you as you are watching this for your comments, your interactions. By the way, I don't know about you, Dr. J, but we receive a lot of wonderful comments and even suggestions by people sometimes, pointing out to some articles, pointing out to some books, some references. And we welcome that all the time. We want to engage with you in discussions and dialogues. We're not here, by the way, to try to emphasize that it's our way or the highway. But at the same time, unless you can present us with anything, as Dr. J mentioned about Dan Gibson's question to the Saudis, asking them, hey, what did you find? Can you show us some artifact? This should be really a groundbreaking, discoveries. If you found anything that points back to a 7th century, 6th century, 5th century, anything, that you can at least tell us that there was civilization, habitation, things that are taking place in there. And the only thing that they were able to point out to was a Ottoman fort. That was in 1299. I mean, that's a long way from 632, almost 700 years later. And again, as Dr. J mentioned, everything points north, Mecca is not north, I can assure you of that much. Mecca is south. Iraq is north, Syria is north, Petra is north, Baghdad is north, everything is north. Turkey is north, Mecca is south. I think everybody today knows that. We need evidence from down south, down under. We do not want it from up above. And sadly, we do not have anything. And that's why I want to really go out on a limb and say, I want to commend actually Dr. Yasser Qadhi for having the courage to say there are holes in the narrative. Because of that, we are taking a lot of deep dives, Dr. Qadhi. Thank you so much. And brother, we thank you for your team, your effort, your research. This is groundbreaking. We're excited really about all of these discoveries because it's been helping a lot of us. I myself, in my own PhD, am benefiting a great deal from those kind of discoveries one way or another. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And until next time, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.